Hey there, Chevette owners and Chevette enthusiasts. I have started on the rear end removal. Uh, Obviously, I still have a bunch to go in the transmission tunnel yet, but we've discovered in, I'd say probably the last 24 hours of poking around in here, that there is very limited amounts of structure in the floor of the Brazilian car. So we are going to frame tie this car, just to make sure that I not only have some place to get a transmission cross member to, but also the rear axle as well. There is not anywhere near as much reinforcement at the transmission mount pads in the floor of this car. There's no structural up or down. It's just welded right there, the little pad that has the 2 bolt holes. And that's like that on both sides. And the floor is rather flexible. And I fear that the torque from the engine and transmission is going to push the floor up. Same thing with back here. Luckily, this still has a very good frame rail area up here in the corner and back here, just like the North American cars do. So we're going to run the frame tie into there, down the rocker panel area and into the front frame rail area there. And that'll give me a couple areas to run some structure across that I know will tie in solidly across there. There may be some additional bracing in here when it's all said and done, but for the most part, the transmission tunnel is going to get completely redone from about there down and from here back, because this has to come up a little bit. So there also will be a brace run from the ties across in front here that will protrude down through the floor with a couple brackets for the torque arm mount for the Heim that's going underneath there. Partly because I would do it under here, but this car sits as low to the ground as it can possibly be, and it will end up just slightly below there, and this already sits on the ground. So in the interest of keeping this car being able to air out and lay on the ground, that's what we're going to do here. So I'm in the process of removing the bolts on everything and dropping this out, and it's all unhooked otherwise. So let me get back on this real quick. Alright, now, because his also is on bags and goes as low as it goes, it's going to be easier for me to reincorporate the buckets in this particular car. I know I've been talking about not doing the bucket swap, mostly because of the axle wrap that can happen because the pivot points out in front of the axle, as well as the buckets squishing. These buckets are a hell of a lot stiffer than North American cars. The other thing is because of the ground clearance. We're just gonna stick with this. Also, I don't want a bunch of stuff hanging down in front of that bag any more than the control arm is, and the ones I'm looking at doing are going to hang down just a little bit more. So again, this one's going to be much like the race car. It's going to get a one-off setup. That one, however, is getting the kit that's going to be offered as soon as we get it in here and get it tested. So that'll be a different setup. That'll be the permanent setup. And that'll be the setup that's probably going to go into the vast majority of these to get a rear end swap. I know they'll all be getting that set up here if they come here for anything. So the other cool thing about this is exhaust routing is a little bit different. Well, I wouldn't say it's a cool thing. It's different. It's cool to me because it's just different to see. But there's no gas tank back here. This is the bottom of the trunk. And then over here would it be where the spare tire stood up in the quarter panel. The muffler actually will sit here. I have to work the floor a little bit in a couple places because we used an oval body muffler rather than a round body muffler. Mostly because originally I thought it was going to be going up there, and it's not. There's just enough room for the pipe that I need to get back through here, but the muffler has to go here. So a little bit different from the North American car in that regards. Quite a bit different floor back here. as far as contour goes. Part of that's because the market's different, or didn't require the catalytic converter, so the floor is more flat on the passenger side, and it didn't need to be as stiff through the side of the car, so there's not as much bracing here, there, and everywhere. There's a few areas where it's the same. Largely the frame rail area right here is the same, but the frame rail technically stops right here, whereas on the North American car goes all the way to the back of the car. There is no frame rails past the rear of the wheel well on the Brazilian car, at least on the sedan. I'm not sure about on the hatch, but definitely on the sedan. However, I guess I can't, because the floor, there's a floor in here right now, but I believe there's a top side to that rail that goes all the way back. So it's not as lacking back here as it appears, but definitely not like these. And just to reiterate why the two-wheel drive S10 rear end is such a good candidate for the Chevette. It's the same width. I mean, relatively. You have an 1/8 inch. By the time you get the axles in here, it's an 1/8 inch wider on both sides, face to face, on the axle flanges. But most of your wheel and tire combinations will make up for that. Basically, what I need to do now is I need to remove the leaf spring purchase. I need to needler this to get the housing clean, but that is coming. Right now I just need to get the axle tubes cleaned up so I can weld on them. The nice thing is, on this particular setup, unlike the North American car that has the track bar mount that has to also be transferred, these are included in the bucket. So I just have to cut them off, clearance them a little bit for the slightly larger diameter axle tubes, and then weld them on in the same spot here with the same pinion angle. And then once I get the plate built for the torque arm, this bolts right back in the car. You know, I was thinking about something. That leaf spring pad technically could stay on these cars, or stay on these rear ends. What I would need to come up with would be a trailing arm bracket that could locate into the leaf spring box, or the leaf spring mounts, just like leaf springs, with a center post to locate it into the pocket. And then the plate just needs holes for the U-bolts. That would not be hard at all to come up with some kind of a bolt-on bracket. And then these don't even have to come off. There is zero surgery. It would be bolt on, bolt on, bolt on, bolt in. Alright. I got the old plasma cutter out. Gotta finish cutting these. I started to cut it off with the cutoff wheel. I got just a nice straight bar temporarily welded in place to keep these at the same distance. I have... This is all prepped, ready to go. So yeah, I just gotta finish cutting these off the bucket, or buckets off of this differential here. Get them prepped for these tubes. Getting there. One step at a time. I do have to flip this over real quick and measure my pinion angle before I go any further, because I don't want to screw this up too bad, but I don't want to screw it up at all. Once I've got my pinion angle wrote down on the whiteboard over there, that way I don't forget it. These will then get screwed to the top of the sawhorses, prepped for the larger diameter tubes, and then that is going to set down inside of them. And of course we are jumping around a bunch because I'm cutting the plate out for that right now. I'm getting all of the metalworking tools out at the moment so I can start getting this cut and set up for this. I have to take some very careful measurements and figure out exactly where up in here this is actually going to intersect, and if I'm going to take it all the way through and weld it solidly to this side of things, This is what I typically do with the North American cars, is I'll poke it out through. That way it's flush with the fender well out here and still into that material that is the frame rail. But then I weld it in and then cap it and plate it. I don't know if that's overkill or if that even does anything more than just simply welding it directly to this contour when I cut it properly, but we'll see. It's definitely going to end up down through this little section right here, so the floor will get cut. And then it's going to get braced into here, because this is where the seat bolts in, and it braced into here, because this is where the seat bolts in. And it's going to get a little cut through here, where it'll slide back through, and we're going to get it down into here, box it into this frame rail, and because it'll protrude down through the floor, it's also going to tie into this here. So we can make this structural along with the tube I'm going to be running across there. Alright, after a quick run to Harbor Freight for a new body saw, I am about to start making some cuts. Now I won't be cutting all of that out. There is a cut line that I will be making, but I will not be removing all of that material. There's only a couple areas where I will be removing material, and that'll be from here to here, and then from here to here. One thing that's nice about this area is I can then bring this back up a little bit, and I can run some bracing across there and into this transmission tunnel area. And that's twofold. It not only will brace the floor under the seats, because these are the front main areas the seats bolt to, but it's a raised area that lets me get in here with transmission tunnel reinforcement for a fairly easy cross member. And then back here, I got to open this up obviously so I can slide the tube back in there so we can triangulate it into there, but I got to get this open as well, as there's a reinforcement bar that will be going in here across between both frame ties. And then there may even be something in addition up here, from there to here somewhere, depending on what I find when I get the engine and transmission back out of there, just to kind of tie it all in. And then the carpet can go back in after that, and it should hide it all. Alright, so I've got all the preliminary cuts done. I have it almost fitting in there. I have to contour it a little bit to fit into the frame rail solidly up there in the front. And then of course I've got a little bit more trimming back here to get this to drop down enough, and then everything will meet up and then they can all be welded together. So I'm going to end here just for this video. By the time we pick up on the next video, this will be in, the other side will be in. I'll probably have the transmission cross member bracing done at the very least, and I'll definitely have this ready to go underneath the car. So this will probably be all in black paint, and the bracket will be done, and we'll go from there. So in the meantime, guys, y'all keep that shiny side up.